Hello, welcome to the Consumer Quarter. I'm Simon Pallan. On the show today, we take a close look at the mobile phone industry, where it's come from and where it's going. Also, online shopping sites try on virtual dressing rooms. But first, it's probably not everyone's ideal way of spending an hour or two of their hard-earned spare time, but a growing number of Australians are going to gyms on a regular basis. The Fitness First gym chain dominates the sector. The company has done well on the back of the health and fitness boom that we've seen over the last decade. But now, for the first time, Fitness First revenues have fallen. It's because there are plenty of new, cheaper gyms muscling their way into the market. It's not your average workout. There's the power ropes, the bag tosses, and the Bulgarian bag.
It's different, people haven't done those before, and it gives you a good workout, gets your heart rate right up there.
Some prefer more conventional workouts, like those offered by Fitness First gyms. Fitness First still dominates the sector with almost 40% of the market, but recently around the country there's been a whole host of smaller and cheaper gyms to emerge. They're giving Fitness First a run for its money.
Fitness First revenue basically actually contracted for the first time in 2010, and that's compared with sort of 3 or 4 years ago. They were growing by double digits and big double digits. They've really been a huge growth story, and now they've sort of reached the point where the market's a bit more stable, a bit more mature.
Some of the people that come here are saying some of the bigger gyms, like Fitness First, are very impersonable. They're very busy, hard to get on machines in the mornings and in evenings, and they've paid their money for their memberships. It's a deduction every month, and when they want to leave, they've had problems getting out of their contracts. I've heard cases of people trying to get out of their contracts and they've still been debited from their accounts. People get sick of that.
One thing that certainly has become apparent is the difficulty people have had with ending their memberships with Fitness First.
Tony DeLead was the founder of Fitness First in Australia, but 3 years ago he left the chain to start up a new one. He called it Fit and Fast.
We were thinking about calling it Fitness Fast, which I thought was closer to Fitness First. So we came up with Fit and Fast, that's what we do. We want you to get fit and we'd like to deliver it fast.
Tony DeLead says his new gym chain with 10 outlets around the country will cost consumers around half the price of Fitness First.
We don't have swimming pools, we don't have a creche, so we unfortunately can't handle mothers with 2 and 3 year olds. We don't have group exercise, which is heavily programmed. We don't have fancy locker rooms, we have basic locker rooms. We don't have steam and sauna. So we take away, I guess, the frills.
And the gym sector is now also facing increased competition from gyms provided by companies for staff to use for free.
A lot of companies have realised if they can provide the health services to their staff on site, it actually means that staff can be healthier and also will be more inclined to stay at the office longer. So it can be a win-win for all people.
Edward Butler there ending that report. And the Consumer Quarter did ask Fitness First to make comment for that story. In a statement, the company says it acknowledges rising competition in the sector, but there was no one available to comment on camera. Now, here's a good party fact. There are now more active mobile phones in Australia than people. There are almost 28 million mobile subscribers. Growth is being driven by population increases and a rise in the number of those using 2 mobile subscriptions, one for personal use and one for business use. And the first mobile phone call in Australia was made 30 years ago. The device has certainly come a long way since then. To mark the 30th anniversary, let's take a look back at the mobile phones of the past. Here's the ABC's David Cody.
When Telecom introduced the mobile phone to Australia in 1981,
Mobile 331964.
it was almost unfathomable that you could make or take a telephone call untethered from the line in your home or office.
Telecom's new mobile telephone service makes it that easy.
It started as a car accessory, too heavy to take with you. Soon, executives were proudly displaying their cutting-edge technology, but it was hardly pocket-sized.
The new system will allow users to make telephone calls from just about anywhere, and that's a proposition that's proving very attractive to Australian businessmen.
The analogue mobile phone network was first rolled out in Melbourne, and with handsets costing thousands, the take-up rate was slow.
Costing more than $5,000, the phones are unlikely to be bought for purely private use.
I'm going to send a message over the land and across the sky to all the people down the river. Mental telepathy. No, mate. Mobile phone.
Every day, telecom.
The mobile hit the mass market in the 90s when Nokia and monochrome screens ruled. 3G networks launched in Australia from 2003, making streaming video over the air a possibility. The last 5 years has seen the smartphone come of age. Apple's iPhone has shaped a market segment, and with other smartphones has enabled always-on internet to define the way we work and communicate. Whatever the developments in telecommunications over the next 30 years, it's likely what we have now will look as primitive as the brick.
That's David Cody with that story. Well, as we've just seen, once upon a time, there were phones that just made phone calls. Now smartphones seem to be taking over our lives. A British survey has found that a third of adults and a majority of teenagers describe themselves as highly addicted to the new mobiles, to the point where they're taken just about everywhere, including to the bathroom. Nearly half of all 12 to 15-year-olds who have a smartphone use them in the bathroom, and 20% of adults with smartphones use them at mealtimes. But unfortunately, a new consumer survey has found Australian telecommunications companies are letting down customers who make complaints. The industry ombudsman says consumers are surprisingly resilient when making complaints, with 1 in 5 saying they spent 9 hours trying to resolve their problems. Consumer groups are calling on the government to step in.
It's one of the most enduring problems of the information age.
One of our representatives will be with you shortly.
Telecommunications companies that let you down and then don't respond to your complaints.
They prolong everything, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, we'll get back to you or we'll send you out this or whatever, and nothing kind of really gets followed up.
They don't care. That's all. I'm thinking of changing very soon.
The annoying thing is they ring and try and sell you a phone sort of every other week, even though you're on a plan.
It's readily understandable why these consumers are frustrated and, in my view, incredibly resilient.
And resilient is a good description of the more than half of the survey's respondents who said they'd contacted their service providers at least 5 times before calling the Ombudsman. Most reported spending 3 or more hours trying to resolve their complaint, and half reported being put in contact with 3 or more departments.
Most of those complaints aren't complex. They're about billing issues, they're about credit management issues, and they're about fault issues. And most of them are solved easily when people are put in touch with the right department.
It just confirms what we've already known. Everybody's got a war story.
Consumer groups say they want firm government intervention.
What we want is a mandatory industry standard. There has to be enforcement and there has to be consequences and fines for providers that don't follow the standard.
The Ombudsman says when telcos do decide to help, they're unacceptably slow.
And we do know there were certainly lots of complaints about continued glitches in Vodafone's mobile network last year.
They lost about 375,000 customers. Many of them were prepaid customers who switched over to Telstra.
It's helped Telstra to a boom in new mobile subscriptions.
2 million new mobile customers join us across our domestic markets and also in Hong Kong. So that's very gratifying and shows that we're really, I think, addressing a tremendous market opportunity.
And Optus says its mobile phone revenue rose 5% last quarter, but it only gained an extra 28,000 mobile subscribers. Well, it looks like electricity price rises are becoming a serious turn-off. There's been a drop in demand for power not seen since the 1950s. Tougher economic times and concern for the environment are believed to be part of it. Despite demand heading south, prices will continue to head north.
Our love of gadgets may be growing, but we're managing to use less electricity at home. Ausgrid operates one of the country's largest power networks.
Well, we've seen a fall in residential energy consumption of around 2% a year for the last 4 years. And what's interesting is that goes against all of the long-term trends.
The fall follows a period of steep price rises. Since 2005, only Adelaide's electricity prices have stayed in line with the national 16% rise in inflation. Other cities have seen costs race ahead, with Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney all seeing increases of 50% or more. Many are turning to energy-efficient technology and solar power to beat the rises.
This is something that more and more people are starting to focus their minds on, and I think that's due to increasing prices to a certain degree, but also due to the fact that it just makes sense.
Despite the drop in household demand, prices will continue to go up. Peak use in summer and winter is growing, demand from industry is increasing, and the ageing infrastructure needs updating. But even with further rises, power prices in this country are still comparatively low.
Australia, it doesn't have the highest electricity prices amongst the Western world. In fact, it will be one of the lowest electricity prices in the Western world.
That's not likely to be much consolation for consumers dealing with price rises across the board, from mortgages and rent to fuel and food.
That's the ABC's Keith Breen there. And just before we go, we keep hearing that online shopping is hurting local retailers. Well, one advantage traditional shops have is that they offer consumers the chance to touch, feel and try before they buy. But now a UK-based online retailer is trying to offer a virtual dressing room of sorts. Using the computer's webcam, it allows online shoppers to try on the clothes featured on the retailer's website.
Like holding up a shirt or dress in front of a mirror, Webcam Social Shopper places the clothes you select in front of you, so you can find the look that works best for you.
It's a good try, but somehow I just don't think that'll be anything like trying on clothes in real life. Anyway, that's all for this edition of the Consumer Quarter. Thanks for joining us. If you've got any comments about the show or any story ideas, you can get in touch on Facebook, search for the Consumer Quarter page and click like if you want to be kept up to date. And I'll see you next time.